Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again today. I've got another video Q&A here as part of our COVID-19 coverage. We're not the daily news per se, but we've got some cool things to talk about in the meat industry with regard to COVID-19, and we want to be able to bring you as much good information on what you can do and what the industry is doing overall. So this is just the latest Q&A via webcam in the new world that we're in. So thanks for joining me. Rich Atkinson from We Are Food Safety is here today to talk a little bit about the whole puzzle with regard to FSIS inspectors and how to keep the inspectors safe, how to keep your plants safe, and just the general idea of what establishments and companies can be doing to protect everyone involved when it comes to inspectors. So Rich, thanks so much for joining me. We're going to jump right into it because my intro is long enough as it is. So a lot of these inspectors, Rich, are exposed. They have multiple plants that they serve, so they're exposed to a lot of people. It's the nature of the business. It's the nature of what they do. What are you seeing? How is industry, or how is FSIS keeping those inspectors safe and healthy, even as they do their daily duties out in the plants and are visiting or working at multiple facilities, multiple establishments?
Right. Well, thank you for giving me this opportunity today. That's actually a really good question. What we have is a memo that was sent out to all of the regulated establishment facility management and FSIS employees. Basically, it gave out some guidance regarding what the establishment owners can do in protecting, their employees, their establishment, and also the FSIS folks as well too. Basically, there are four things that can be done. Basically, you can ask if the USDA employees experience symptoms of COVID-19. You can also ask if someone is living in the USDA employee's household, or someone in the USDA is caring for or been exposed to anyone with COVID-19. Also, the industry leaders may also measure USDA's temperature via a digital forehead thermometer. So that is something actually that's really good. This guidance came out, and if any of those things are in the negative, then the plant management can stop the USDA employee from coming into their facility. Actually, and I would suggest that you put these type of measures in for anybody new or anybody coming into your facility. The thing is that we've got to get to a point where we are basically holding people back and just trying to isolate this thing as best as we can, because the numbers keep going up in the general population. So we've got to get to the point where we are in fact doing our part and things like that as well too. So that's the main thing when it comes to our FSIS folks, and there could potentially be a shortage, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah, so before we jump into the shortage and as the pandemic evolves, so knowing the industry and the plants the way you do and the way your colleagues there know the plants, is really the food safety training that they take into account, the food security training that they undergo, is there a place, is this a convergence of all that training? Is that allowing them to address even this particular pandemic? And yeah, it's not a food pathogen or anything like that, but it is a worker health, worker safety thing. And it sounds like a lot of the regimented kind of things that a company would do for food safety or for food security really have positioned the meat and poultry industry in a good spot to where they can address this. Do you see that when you're talking to clients and talking to processors?
Actually, I do, and that's a really good point, because our basic general sanitation in the processing areas, that will certainly control it, not only control it but kill any viruses, bacteria, anything like that that's out there anyway. But they are positioned at a very good place to actually just kind of, it's in a way it's business as usual as far as sanitation, but I think this has got to be stepped up a little bit more into the into the other public areas, so to speak, in the common areas in the establishment and things like that too. So, but yeah, that's a very good point. And honestly, I think the industry in general, if they can just keep ahead of it, I think they're going to be in a pretty good place.
Great, great. So let's talk about, as the pandemic evolves, there's a lot of mixed messages out there about how long is this going to last, and obviously nobody really knows. We don't even know if we've reached the peak of of the outbreak, if you will, of the pandemic. And certain states are behind others. They just shut down Indiana today or yesterday for shelter in place type things, but Chicago's been shelter in place for almost a week plus, Illinois in general. So some states are ahead of the curve on the timeline, some are behind, not in a bad way, just on a different timeline. So nobody really knows when this is going to finally reach the crescendo and then maybe start slowing down. And I think that's got to concern folks, because as this pandemic goes on, folks are getting sick. Every corner of society, someone's getting sick. And I think it's only a matter of time before someone in the meat industry or an inspector or something gets sick. What should processors be concerned about in terms of FSIS inspectors? And if this pandemic gets worse and more get sick, are we looking at shortages? And what should processors do to kind of prepare for that, or maybe even prevent it in some ways?
So that's a really good question, actually. And if it does continue, if this COVID-19 the spread does continue and inspectors get sick, there will be potential of a shortage of personnel. What will happen in that case is that all resources will be basically moved to slaughter operations, because as we know, the Federal Meat Inspection Act, it's required that every carcass is inspected. So all the available resources would be propped up on the slaughter side. Processing operations would still continue as normal, but within the normalized time frames that you would have in your approved hours of operation. You may not see an inspector for a day or two if this does happen, or you may see a different inspector. So the biggest thing and the most critical thing that needs to happen is communication with your frontline supervisor. If you're not seeing an inspector or anything like that, certainly let the frontline know. And also, record keeping at this point is going to be critical, because you want to make sure that you're be able to demonstrate that you implemented all your food safety plans and sanitation plans in accordance how they were written, and be able to demonstrate that through records. So that would be the just really keep a good eye on your record keeping system, and just pay a little bit more attention to that, and a little bit more communication with your frontline as well too, or the district office. So.
And in terms of the record keeping, that would be so that when an inspector does get there, they'll go back and look at what you did while there was no one there to check on it, in theory?
Correct. And in theory, that's what we would need to make sure that we're aware of, and that we're able to demonstrate that. And because there will be, I do assume that there will be some shortages out there. So, and like I said, everything's going to go to the slaughter floor. But the processors will still be able to process the way they normally would before. And so yeah, so that's the biggest thing with that, with record keeping.
So in terms of the biohazard kind of approach to keeping COVID-19 out of plants, you talked about some of the things that plants are allowed to ask inspectors, and the idea of taking temperature before they come in the facility. I've heard of quite a few plants doing that. Is there something else that processors maybe should be doing that they might not be, or should consider doing? Or do you think that's a pretty good approach to keeping COVID-19 out of the plants, away from the employees, away from the inspectors, things like that?
I would highly recommend the way this was written up from the memo was written up from Dr. Bronstein, and I would highly recommend that they at the very least have those type of procedures put in place for anybody and everybody that comes into the establishment, because that's really the only way that you're going to be able to keep it out. Another suggestion would be is to keep some of your key personnel and maybe stagger them different days coming into the plant at different times. Maybe try to do some staggering as much as possible. Get some backup for your other critical employees, your quality control employees, your HACCP employees. Kind of try to cross train some folks, so in case there are some absences or absenteeism for whatever reason, somebody else can just kind of jump in and just kind of go from there. I do know that I've been getting a lot of word back from some folks out there that are just really super busy. Their grinders are just going practically 24/7, trying to keep ground beef in the stores and on the shelves, which is very admirable that everybody's just really kind of getting on the front line of this thing and trying to do whatever it is they can to keep, us as a society going, because that's a very most important part of our society is our food supply. So hats off to everybody that's doing that. There's also been some stressful moments out there a little bit with some folks. So just kind of keep in mind, take care of yourself, and do what you can not to get too upset over things. This too shall pass, and it will pass. So I know there's a lot of different stressors out there, but sometimes that brings a little bit more problems than what you really want to deal with right now. So just try to keep this right.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. This too shall pass, and remember, we're all under the same stresses, right? So, hopefully, this will put a lot of the industry in a better place, knowing that if they can react to something like this and do it effectively, if not outstandingly, whenever this calms down, they'll know what their breaking point is if that kind of thing exists. So anything else you wanted to add, Rich, on COVID-19, keeping it out of the plants, inspectors, anything along those lines?
I think we've really covered some of the main points here. Again, I can't stress enough to just keep a good biohazard program going in your facility, in your plant, and just and keep up the good record keeping system that you already have in place. So that would be my biggest thing right now. And thank you for allowing me to take the time to talk to your folks. So that's great. Thank you.